Ayo. Check, check. Testing mic, sound check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Sound check. Testing mic, sound check.
Check, 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 check. Sound check. Check, testing. 1, 2, 3, mic testing, sound check. Check, 1, 2, 3, sound check.
Testing, sound check.
Sound check.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Sound check. Testing mic, sound check.
Check, sound check, testing, mic testing, sound check. Sound check, 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 testing, mic testing, sound check. Sound check, testing, 1, 2, 3, mic testing, sound check. Sound check, testing,
Testing,
mic
sound
testing.
check. Testing mic, sound check.
Sound check, testing, 1, 2, 3, sound check. Check, sound check, testing, mic testing, sound check. Sound check, check, check.
Testing mic, sound check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Sound check. Testing mic, sound check.
Sound check, testing, mic testing, sound check, check. Check, sound check, testing.
Testing, sound check. Testing mic, sound check. Taas mo konti.
Sound check, check,
Sound check. Testing, sound check. Okay.
Check, sound check, testing, 1, 2, 3, mic testing, sound check. Sound check, testing, mic testing, sound check.
Pwede na. Wala. Gusto nila makita ulit mo. In fairness, type ko ang ano nila. Hanap ako ng ganyan. Ah, 3:30.
3:20. 3:30 daw. 3:20 chime on. 3:20 yung chime. Ang chime daw. 3:30 sa reset. Malighay Master Choral.
Merry Christmas na Jose Marichan.
Dadalhin sa clinic. Galing pa naman ng Sambales. Sambales, man. Kababayan pa naman nila.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us all rise for the arrival of the Honorable Senate President and the Senators of the Republic of the Philippines.
Dapat may subsidiary increase na ito. Pero dahil simple course lang.
Sani is leaving today.
Wala ba sila? Victor? Siya ano eh. Minute silent prayer eh. Joel na lang. Joel, oh. The 16th session of the Senate and the first regular session of the 18th Congress is hereby called to order. May we ask Senator Joel Villanueva to lead the chamber in prayer?
Put ourselves in the presence of the Lord. Heavenly Father, we thank and praise you for this wonderful time and opportunity you have given us that we can serve our country and people, especially to you, our Lord, our God. You said in your word that apart from you, we can do nothing. And that's why we ask that you guide us, be with us, give us your treasury of wisdom from heaven as we perform our duties and responsibilities as senators of the Republic of the Philippines. We ask that you bless all of us here, even every family represented in this institution. We give you praise, glory, and honor. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. and
Amen.
Amen.
The Malighay Master Chorale of Zambales will lead us in the singing of the Philippine National Anthem, and the group will also render a song entitled Pilipinas Kung Mahal. Thank you. The Malighay Chorale of Zambales.
Sambanes, sa area ni Tito Dick. Blow out mo, Tito Dick.
Secretary, will please call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, De La Rosa, Drilon, Gatchalian, Go, Gordon, Ontiveros, Lacson, Lapid, Marcos, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Revilla, Tolentino, Villanueva, Villar, Zubiri, Senate President Soto III.
With 20 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Before we take up some administrative matters, we'd just like to recognize, we have with us today Mayor Datu Pax Mangudadatu of Abdullah Sanki, Maguindanao, as well as Mayor Jovito Calio Carmen of Agusan del Norte, and also former Mayor of Puon Bayabao of Lado del Sur, Dr. Lampa Pandi, and we have guests also coming from the Restoration of Filipino Values, headed by Dr. Voltaire Acosta Jr., their National Director.
We welcome all our guests to the Senate.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journals of the 14th session Tuesday, August 27, 2019, and the 15th session on Wednesday, August 28, and consider them as approved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Secretary will proceed with the reference of business.
Reference of business, bills on first reading. Senate number 984, titled An Act Establishing the Sarangani State College in the Municipality of Alabel, Province of Sarangani, and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Senator Angara.
Referred to the Committees on Higher Education, Ways and Means, and Finance.
Senate number 985, an act allowing women to revert to their maiden surname, establishing a procedure for reversion and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Senator Lapid.
To the Committees on Women, Justice, and Finance.
Senate number 986, an act providing for full scholarship to children and dependents of law enforcement officers killed or permanently incapacitated in the line of duty or by reason of their office or position and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Lapid.
To the Committees on Civil Service and Finance.
Senate number 987, an act increasing the excise tax on heated tobacco products and vapor products, amending for this purpose sections 144B, 144C, 147, and 150 of the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997 as amended, and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Pacquiao.
Referred to the Committee on Ways and Means.
Senate number 988, an act establishing the Philippine National Sports Academy, defining its powers and functions, appropriating funds therefore, and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Pacquiao.
To the Committees on Sports, Civil Service, and Finance.
Senate number 989, an act establishing the Philippine Marine Corps, defining its powers and functions, appropriating funds therefore, and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Binay.
To the Committees on National Defense and Finance.
Senate number 990, an act to strengthen the jurisdiction and power of the Department of Energy over petroleum pipeline operations, and for this purpose provide a petroleum pipeline code to prescribe standards for the design, construction, operation, and maintenance and abandonment of liquid petroleum pipelines and appropriating funds therefore, and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Binay.
To the Committees on Energy, Public Services, Ways and Means, and Finance.
Senate number 991, an act to promote the discovery and production of indigenous petroleum and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Binay.
To the Committees on Energy, Ways and Means, and Finance.
Senate number 992, an act promoting a low-carbon economy and establishing an emission cap-and-trade system in the industry sector to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and protecting the climate, introduced by Senator Binay.
To the Committees on Climate Change, Trade, and Finance.
Resolutions. PS Resolution number 119, titled Resolution Directing the Senate Committee on Energy to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the service contracts issued by the Department of Energy to the energy exploration companies with the end in view of ensuring that such contracts are not disadvantageous to government and to our indigenous energy resources, introduced by Senator Recto.
To the Committee on Energy.
PS Resolution number 120, resolution directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation to review the existing radio frequency allocation policy and to determine the remaining uncommitted radio frequencies with the end in view of its possible redistribution to qualified licensees, introduced by Senator Recto.
To the Committee on Public Services.
Communications, letter from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas transmitting to the Senate copies of the following certified and authenticated BSP issuances in compliance with Section 15A of Republic Act Number 7653, the new Central Bank Act. Memorandum Number M 2019-016 dated 11 June 2019. Circular letters number CL 2019-040-041-042 dated 30 May June 4, 2019, and circular number 1041 dated 29 May 2019.
The Committee on Banks. There is additional reference to business.
Additional reference of business bill on first reading, Senate number 993, entitled An Act Repealing Republic Act number 10592, otherwise known as an Act amending Articles 29, 94, 97, 98, and 99 of Act number 3815 as amended, introduced by Senator Soto III, Lacson, and Gordon.
To the Committees on Justice and Constitutional Amendments. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, our distinguished colleague from Taguig, Pateros, Senator Pia Cayetano would request for the privilege hour to deliver a privilege speech. May we recognize the distinguished lady, Senator.
Yes, the distinguished lady from Taguig and Pateros, Senator Pia Cayetano, is recognized.
A minute suspension, Mr. President, as they fix the slide presentation that I have.
Session suspended.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session resumed. Senator Cayetano. Yes, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I was wondering why the slide wasn't coming down yet. Mr. President, the title of my privileged speech is, What is the Purpose of Homework? Do we need more? Do we need less? So I ask all of you to remember your maybe grade school days, and I'm just curious to know if the people in our colleagues experience a lot of homework, a little homework, or no homework. May I ask for a very informal survey from my colleagues? So no homework, raise your hand. Minimal homework, ayan, minimal homework, si Joel. Homework, minimal? Minimal. Minimal. So, a lot of homework, did anyone experience? Si Grace, a lot. Okay, Senator Grace and Senator Risa answered a lot of homework. Si Senator Sherwin, hindi sumagot.
Yung homework ng girlfriend.
Okay. So clearly we all come from a different background, Mr. President, when it comes to our education experience, because whether you come from a private school, a public school, there's also a lot of latitude given to our teachers. So in the news for the past few weeks were articles on bills that have been filed to drastically lessen or even ban homeworks during the weekends. But before we decide, and before I hope that the Senate as a body starts discussing the issue of homework, let's understand first what is the purpose of homework. So this is a summary that we culled from the various sources. The purpose of homework is to help reinforce what was taught in class, to gather extra information beyond what was taught, to enhance a student's knowledge on a subject, and to help struggling students improve their grasp of the topic. So nowhere there is it said that the student is meant to study alone. That's not the purpose of homework or to learn on their own. It's really to reinforce, to increase and enhance their knowledge. But when we discuss whether we will increase or decrease homework, the question we need to ask ourselves, is there a correlation between top-performing countries when it comes to education standards and their homework hours? So I chose 5 countries to present to you. I'll show you the slide. So these are the top 5. It's not, I hope we can make it bigger. Anyway, the top 5 countries that will be shown to you are Finland, South Korea, Brazil, Argentina, and Japan. So interestingly, these 5 countries are the top 5 in the least number of homework hours in a week. Finland has 2.8, South Korea 2.9, all the way to Japan 3.8. So that's less than 1 hour a day of homework. What is now the ranking in the educational system ranking? This happens to be a 24 ranking. There are updates, but I'll tell you that these countries are more or less still in the top. So in terms of the best education system ranking, Finland is top 5, South Korea is number 1, and Japan is number 2. So for the top 5 countries in terms of less homework, 3 of them, you can conclude that there is a correlation if you look at the 3. But the other 2 are not in the top. They're not even in the top 30. So I have more data, but I'm keeping you at 5 to keep the discussion simple. So you can't really say there's a correlation because Brazil and Argentina that have very minimal homework are in the top 40 only, not in the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, the reason for that is because there are many other factors that go into the success of an educational program, and I'll quickly walk you through it. Let's look at South Korea, that has consistently been in the top. Only 2.9 hours of homework per week. However, and I apologize that the print is so small, so I will have to read to all of you. That's a little bit misleading because they only have 2.9 hours of homework, but they have hours and hours of private study time. They have a lot of after-school work, either in the school or outside of the school. That is typical of if not all of the Korean students. And the classrooms have all the amenities of smart technology, high-speed internet, etc. And they also have summer school. Okay, so that's the situation in South Korea. Japan, I would say, is similar in the sense that they have very low homework, but they also have so much after-school activities, both academic and non-academic. In fact, the teachers and the students are charged with cleaning their own schools. That's a major part of their daily activities. They clean their own schools. Some schools require that they come in on Saturday for studies, and they give a lot of time for both academic and non-academic activities after school. Finland is actually my favorite. Only 2 hours of homework per week. But let me walk you through all the other amenities or support that Finland gives to their students. School actually starts at 7. So what does that mean? They don't have to go to school. They don't. It's not required, but they have a very strong early childhood education system in every community. And I think the figures like 90% do send their children to early childhood education, even though it is not required. They have free school, their school have free meals. They have easy access to healthcare. They have psychological counseling. And the teachers, this is the best part as far as I'm concerned. The teachers, all of the teachers teaching basic ed are required to have a master's degree. It is an honor to become a teacher in Finland. It is one of the most prestigious jobs to be a teacher in Finland. And I've watched TED Talks. I would be happy to share it with you. I've watched videos. I've read books on the Finnish education. It really was a countrywide decision to make their education system this way. And one last point, there are no private schools. They're all if I say none, maybe there's one or two because it says, basically says they're none. They're all public schools. So the conclusion is, no matter how rich you are forced to support a public school system because your kids will go to public school. So that's how it is in Finland. Yes. I also want to emphasize that they are very big on giving latitude to the teachers to decide on how to teach. And when they're questioned, this was based on a U.S. comparative study, would a Finnish family want to transfer to another community or cross town because there's a better school? There's no such thing daw like that in Finland because all the schools are created the same. They have such high respect for the teachers that they will not even think that mas magaling yung teacher doon kaysa sa teacher dito. So ganun po doon. Now, this is the sad thing about homework that I want to point out. There are numerous studies that show that homework reinforces inequalities in socioeconomic classes in some countries. How does this happen? In many countries in the world, those who belong to the upper socioeconomic class go to private schools and they do a lot of homework compared to those who go to public schools. And the outcomes are very different. Those kids in the private schools with a lot of homework end up faring better. So if you look at that study in isolation, you will conclude that more homework is better. I'm not prepared to make that conclusion. I'm just pointing out studies that show that within a country, there are these inequities that are brought about the different kinds of education that children can avail of. Let's dissect that. What difference is there between a school, a private school where you pay and where a child will go to versus a public school? I don't have a slide to show you, but I can tell you from experience and from talking to a lot of parents and to visiting a lot of schools. Number one, it would be access to after-school programs in and outside of school, both academic and non-academic. Let me give you a moment to think about that. All of you who have children know that either your child would be involved in glee club, in sports, in arts, in music, in debate, and so on and so forth. The school that my daughters went to, which is La Salle Zobel High School, they're very well known for sports, so a lot of the kids there excel in sports, and a lot of them go on to participate in the Atenista is sitting beside me, nagkakamot. Wala akong plug tungkol sa Ateneo kasi wala akong anak na nag-Ateneo, but I will give you the floor later on. Ma'am, my point is, go to a private school and access to activities, both academic and non-academic, are never, ever wanting. Sometimes it is subsidized, or the parents will pay extra. The point is there is access. That is not so in many public schools. The other difference between socioeconomic classes when it comes to education is the proper environment. Many children with a upper class, coming from an upper class, would be able to go home and either quietly study in their dining table, or quietly study in their own bedroom, or some would even have a study room. Most people who send their children to public schools do not have that. Salo-salo na ho yung dining table, yung living room, nanonood ng kung ano man pinapanood. Wala hong opportunity to concentrate. And that has been identified as a major problem in making homework effective. They cannot even focus when they are in an environment like that. And third is the support from family or caregivers. Whether it's a parent or a substitute parent when parents are working and they can afford to hire a tutor, there is support given when you come from a higher socioeconomic bracket. Those who come from a lower economic bracket have more difficulty because probably the working mom and dad cannot afford to get a tutor. Baka wala rin naman tita o lola na magtuturo. So wala na ngang magandang environment, wala rin hong support na inaibibigay. So without that, it becomes extremely difficult to have an effective homework program. Meanwhile, I also want to point out the situation of teachers. I am so envious of the reality that in Finland, teachers are one of the highest paid. Why? Because I want to be able to leave that kind of legacy to our children, that you go to any school in the Philippines and you will get the best education. I know that our teachers are hardworking. A lot of them were scholars on their own. But the reality is, we could do better in terms of making that career track more effective and more attractive to teachers. We could do better in trying to pull the best and the brightest into the teaching professions. Now, why is it so important to have a good teacher? Well, a good teacher will not just go by the books. A good teacher will identify the strengths and weaknesses of their students. And this is where the correlation to homework comes in. To dictate upon a teacher a blanket prohibition against assignments or a mandate on exactly how much time to give a student in terms of homeworks would restrain his or her ability to provide for the needs of his or her students. So before anyone concludes that I am pro-homework, I want to put on record that I come from a no-homework background. My mother is a teacher, a preschool teacher, and I went to a school that had basically no homework for the entire grade school. And I loved it. Maybe because my background comes from being with my mother all the time, I studied on my own. And if you look at the successful programs in other countries, that's what it is all about. It's providing a learning environment wherever you are, not ABC types of homework. So I'm not against homework per se, but I am definitely for creating the best kind of learning environments for our students. If we dictate a number of hours, what about those who follow an academic track? My children did not go to an international school. They went to a private school but not an international school. So I have no personal experience with the IB program. Maybe somebody here has one to share it, but all I know is for those who have sent their children to the IB programs, it is extremely tedious. And these kids study all day, every day, Saturdays and Sunday, kulang na kulang sa tulog. But they do that because that is what is required to enter a prestigious school abroad. So how can we now say, huwag kang mag-homework kung yun yung requirement para matapos mo yung academic track na yun? Paano natin ililimit yung, or let's say, no, a student is struggling when it comes to math, pero decidido siya to pursue a career in science, but there are math requirements. So the teacher may require that that student does extra work. So if we prohibit that, then we effectively banned that student from getting extra work from their teacher. And I actually had told my kids in high school, ask your teacher for more work. Kasi nga, pag walang homework, I love it, but if they're struggling, then they need extra work so that they can catch up. So that's my only concern here, Mr. President. I am such a believer of no homework. I am such a believer. I will end my privileged speech with a photo of a holistic child, because I am in full support of limiting and only focusing on quality homework, because we want a holistic child. That is our objective. I made this up. In fact, kulang pa nga kasi meron pa akong dagdag na community and church. But basically, this is what we want for our children, that they learn outside of school. And there are also tried and tested results showing that if you study continuously, you do not give your brain a chance to recover and come back fresh. It is actually recommended before you take exams that you take a nap, you have a good sleep, because that's how the brain works. It can only retain memory when it's given a chance to take a break. So, I repeat that I am all for studying the effect of homework, but I would like to ask this body to approach this not in isolation. Let us look into what we need to do to provide our children with a holistic learning environment. It cannot be homework or no homework only. It has to be an environment that promotes learning in the classroom, outside of the classroom, in the homes, in the communities, and wherever they are in the Philippines. So, I end on that note, Mr. President,
Right.
knowing that everybody here genuinely wants to be able to provide the best for our young children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Cayetano.
May we recognize,
Before we recognize Senator Poe, may we ask Senator Cayetano what she thinks of homework that's done in the school? Yes, it's called the homework, but the student usually does it in school.
assignment niya, assignment.
Ay, Mr. President,
Hindi, homework, pero sa eskwela ang ginagawa.
actually, Mr. President, that's a great question. I forgot to include that in my speech. In a lot of countries, and I think even maybe in some schools here, they actually have a study time where they let their student do the homework in school. So in other words, kasi the proper environment is there. It's a library or it's a classroom, it's quiet. Sometimes there might even be a teacher available to assist, and then they can go home and have that quality time with family. I would love that to be present, but for us to be able to do that, we have to address our 2-shift and 3-shift classrooms. How can you ask a child, oh, stay and do your homework, eh merong another shift of students coming in for the afternoon shift? Another idea there would really to have every barangay to have a study hall. And then it's a community-based study area. They can be studying, they could be doing arts and crafts. There's a lot of things that can be done actually. Thank you for that question, Mr. President.
All
Mr.
right,
President, before we recognize Senator Grace, I was told by Senator Gatchalian to correct the impression. He does not have any children, so he does not answer homeworks, only the homeworks of his girlfriends. Mr. President. May we
Senator-
recognize Senator...
Senator Grace Poe is recognized.
Mr. President, first I'd like to thank the good senator from Taguig for bringing up a very important issue, an angle that we should really focus on, and that's the holistic approach. I guess as a parent, as a lawmaker, we're really attempting to find a way so that our children can absorb more from the educational system without exactly overburdening both the teachers and the students. I'd like to clarify that my bill specifies no homework in the weekends in particular. Although you're right, the senator from Taguig is right by saying that we cannot really quantify like the number of hours, like to say 4 hours of extra work. But this I will say, the senator's right to point out that because of some economic disparities, some students can actually suffer more from being overburdened with homework. For example, marami sa ating mga kababayan, ang tumutulong yung mga anak sa kanilang mga magulang at sa kanilang pamilya, pag sila'y umuwi sa bahay. Tapos, pag maraming mga binibigay pa na extra projects o trabaho na kailangan gawin sa bahay, mas makukulangan talaga sila ng oras para sa pahinga, na napaka-importante rin para lumaki silang mas matalino, di ba, kung kulang sa tulog. Ako mismo, nakikita ko yung anak kong halos umiiyak na sa dami ng trabahong ibinibigay ng institusyon na hindi na makatwiran. Bagamat, hindi naman sa pinagyayabang, mataas talaga yung grado ng anak ko, walang kinalaman yun eh. Yung pressure talaga. Pero yung sinasabi natin na, kasi kahit na, yung isang anak ko naman sinasabi, kontra siya sa akin kasi daw, paano daw matututo ang bata para sa demands ng workplace at ng college education kung wala silang homework? Kasi totoo pa rin, marami pa rin trabahong ibinibigay. Kaya nga yung compromise, sana pag weekends, wala na. At saka yung mga projects na alam mong gagasta ng napakalaki para gawin yon, unless i-provide ng school, wag na. Ang hirap maghanap ng materials, ang hirap maghanap ng, yun nga, kung walang study hall, saan mo gagawin lahat yon? Nakita na nga natin, may mga batang natutulog na habang nagbabasa, pagkatapos magtinda ng sampagita. Kaya nga, sa ating mga guro at sa ating mga magulang, lahat naman tayo ay gusto natin magtagumpay ang ating mga estudyante. Pero siguro, kung ang ating period ay 45 minutes, siguro pwedeng gawin, magturo ka ng 30 minutes, yung 15 minutes pwedeng gawin na in advance yung ibang trabaho. Para, first of all, the child will learn also to responsibility that they have to finish within a specified time. Nagturo din ako dati, pero dun sa pinagturuan ko, wala rin mga homework. Yung isang estudyante ko, physicist na sa NASA. So, anyway, maraming salamat po.
Actually, if I may just respond, I thank the senator for her input, and I agree with everything that she said, because ang objective talaga natin is hindi maging burdensome ang homework, but to recognize that there may be reasons that students would need extra work, and that could be those who are seeking additional points or extra credit, or are pursuing a very difficult track that really requires extraordinary amount of work be done. And then I'll give an example, and my daughter will probably kill me for using her as an example, but she just graduated from the College of Architecture in UP, and her classmates in physics, they had a physics class which is required of architecture students, and all the architecture students were dying because it was a high-level physics, but the physics students were just, ano ba tawag doon? Wala lang. They were having such an easy time. So definitely, the architecture students had to work so much harder. So if they had to, and my daughter had to hire a private teacher. She had to work, she actually took it during the summertime, and she worked Monday to Sunday on that freaking physics class, just because it was such a difficult class, and almost all the students in architecture, ang balita nga is one of these days mafe-phase out na daw yun sa curriculum nila, which is kind of sad that they had to suffer that way. But I just use it to highlight the reality that there would be areas where extra studying is done, but it really, I agree with the senator that it should be done in it should be more of the exception. I think that's the rule. It should be more of the exception. And agree din po ako doon, yung isang katakot-takot na mga project na inaabot ng siyam-siyam, medyo we have to rethink that. It should be a class project instead, that they do maybe on Friday afternoons, pag light ang load nila. And the other input that I also wanted to give is that in the assignments of in the preparation of the assignment, maybe what DepEd can actually do is recall what I read were supposed to be the purposes of giving an assignment. It should not take the place of teaching in the classroom. It should be to enhance learning. Yun naman po kasing pinost ko is just a collection of some experts, but I read something else there which wasn't included, to give students who are delayed or having difficulties the chance to catch up. So that's why they would do additional work. For those who come from the higher socioeconomic bracket, simple lang yun eh, they will go to an after-school class and pay thousands of pesos. But I think what we're trying to address is the bulk of the Filipinos who do not have that ability to go to after-school class in terms of funding and also access. Baka wala dun sa barangay nila ng after-school class na yon, which is why I also go back to the importance of teacher training, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Grace, for your
Senator Joel
intervention.
Villanueva is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the onset, may I be allowed to commend and congratulate the distinguished lady from Taguig for bringing this very timely issue. And I'd like to put on record that this representation fully supports the privileged speech of the distinguished lady from Taguig. I also wanted to put on record, Mr. President, that we are, not all of us, I think, are fan of work-life balance. If you would recall, last Congress, we were able to pass measures like Telecommuting Act. And what this topic is all about is that we need to focus on the student work-life balance. For me, Mr. President, I think it's important that the distinguished lady from Taguig made mention about limiting homework. Hindi lang ito usapin ng no homework or yes, more homework. Kailangan balanse ho dapat. And may I just ask the distinguished lady, if I may, of her insights, there was a suggestion that homework will still be around. Of course, for me, let me put on record, I don't want homework for my kids during weekends because that's the only time I can spend a lot of time with my kids. But if you give homework, there must be, for example, per subject, there was a suggestion na 15 minutes per subject. Pero kung lahat naman sabay-sabay magbibigay, if you're talking about 7 subjects, 15 minutes each, that's almost 2 hours. Pagka ganun ho, no? What's the ideal perhaps if the distinguished lady would give us her views regarding this issue?
Mr. President, I think, again, my disclaimer is I personally do not have an education background, but I do study a lot on this issue. And one view is that a homeroom teacher would regularly meet with the other teachers and would say that, oh, so ngayon kayong mga whatever, grade 2, grade 3, multiplication tayo, so we have to give it 2 to 3 weeks. Talagang everyday, pukpuk sa multiplication. All of us know, I don't know kung sino dito yung math genius, pero I spent one whole summer memorizing, na lahat nakatingin kay Senator Coco Pimentel. I spent my whole summer, the year between grade 2 and grade 3, memorizing the table, the multiplication table. So there's no way around that. You have to memorize the multiplication table. So if the homeroom teacher would, if our teachers would have time to sit down and prioritize, that is one way that it can be done. That per subject ang priority. Like maybe for this week, 2 subjects lang ang ano natin, reading and math. Or may bagong science concept na tinuro. So for this week, mamasyal kayo sa farm nyo, if you're in an agricultural land, and tingnan nyo anong itsura ng environment nyo doon. Another example given is, it's a 10-minute rule, no? And this simply means that whatever the subject is, it's really just 10 minutes. Another suggestion could really be, what are the standards? If you want children to be at a certain reading proficiency by a certain grade level, then you assign them books. Not that by Monday it's finished, but it's more like a long-term assignment, no? And the teacher can just touch base with the parents to remind them that they should be finishing this. I am always actually pleasantly surprised when I would hear of my pamangkins in the US. Over the summer, they have a reading list. Because that's how you keep up with the reading, because it's additional work. And interestingly, studies really show that those that come from the poorer socioeconomic brackets who don't have access to this extra learning, they go back to school a notch, parang nag-regress sila. May studies po na ganun. They regress because their brain wasn't stimulated. Now, I'm not saying continue studying, go to summer school, but there's got to be a way to bridge that learning gap. So, to go back to your question, there are a number of suggestions that DepEd can look into. The younger they are, it could be a 10-minute rule. I know of one school, 10 minutes grade 1, 20 minutes grade 2, 30 minutes pag grade 3. And then the homeroom teacher should really coordinate
There shouldn't
all
be
of
a
this.
universal
Probably not, but the rule
formula.
should be, the younger they are, the less, because they need more playtime. And then when you go to high school, I think depending on the tracks, it would differ. Because if they're in a vocational track, remember when I pointed out Korea and Japan, the number of hours for homework is small, but the after school is a lot. So it's possible if you were in a vocational track that you could be 2 hours or 6 hours doing your apprenticeship work. But that is not considered homework. That is considered an after-school activity. Meanwhile, if you're in an academic track, well, you might really have to be burning the midnight oil,
Yeah.
Malaho si Rizal, and really reading up and practicing your math.
I just would like to bring up, because there are also studies that say that when the curriculum is too rigorous, the homework should be required to cover all the required competencies. I don't know what the distinguished lady from Taguig is looking at, but I also think that this is also an issue of perhaps curriculum development. Hence, we could probably look into our present curriculum, the K-12, for instance, the enhanced basic education curriculum. If we can, me being from TESDA before, know the importance of competency-based programs. If we can meet all required competencies without giving homework to our students, then there's no use to giving homework. Is that a correct statement, distinguished lady from Taguig?
In a way, I would say I agree with that, because if the competencies are defined and they are met in the classroom, then what a child should focus on, similar to the Finland example, is other non-academic pursuits outside of classroom. I think that is really ideal. That is really ideal. But remember what I told you, the teachers in Finland all have master's degrees.
Yeah.
And the quality of education, yung pinanggalingan din po ng kanilang education, ibang level din po. Kaya it really matters. And on my own, there is so much that goes into the experiences also of these teachers in being able to address. I was not able to point out also, Mr. President, the classroom size. Some of
Yes.
these schools that I point out have 1:9 ratio student to
Ratio of
teacher.
student teachers.
1:20. So the ability of a student to identify a slow learning student is very, very fast, no? Because 9 lang naman yung binabantayan niya doon. So it would be easier for her to be carved out of that rule and say, sulatan si nanay na ito, nagpadala ho ako ng mga workbooks, mga activities para maka-catch up yung anak nyo. So, but the rest of the class may not need that at all.
The idea, Mr. President, distinguished colleague, is that because even this afternoon's organizational meeting with the Committee on Higher and Technical Education, we talk about curriculums. For instance, in TESDA, it's easier to adjust. It's easier to look at the training regulation and find out if this is really timely, this is in demand, needed by our industries. However, if you look at the Commission on Higher Education program, it's a lot more difficult to adjust. And so, again, if I go back to the same issue that we were talking about, if overcrowded po yung curriculum, hindi po talaga realistic na tanggalin absolutely ang homework, no? So, yun naman yung another issue that I wanted to raise.
Actually, that's such an interesting question, because I don't know if I'm going to use the past tense, that I was a believer also of streamlining the curriculum, stick to the basics. But when I looked at the curriculum of these other countries, like in Japan, and I'm so amazed, they have subject matters that deal solely with the promotion of their culture and arts. Like yung not just po yung the writing of the characters, which is difficult in itself, no, but something like calligraphy, yung parang ganung version nila. And even in Finland, they have so many other courses. So if you look at based on arts, the argument will be, tanggalin na yung mga hindi kailangan, pati nga PE, tinanggal. But in developed countries, and I'll tie this now into what is the goal for us to be a upper middle income country, binabalik
That's the
naman
goal.
nila lahat yun.
That's the goal.
So, it's a little bit difficult to figure out what should we do. But honestly, in a perfect world where you have very talented teachers, very skilled and talented teachers, smaller classroom size, all the amenities that support learning, then I think it's achievable. So it would really boil down to bigger budget for education,
Exactly.
even though it's already the biggest budget.
Perhaps, actually, Mr. President, we were talking about it here with Senator Gordon and Senator Pimentel. The more options we can offer, and perhaps more electives. But the problem now becomes, it will create another problem, which is budgeting. But anyway, Mr. President, I'd like to wrap up and just commend the distinguished lady from Taguig. We appreciate the researches that was mentioned on the floor. I think researches from Europe, Africa, or US, and even from our neighboring countries. May I just ask one last question, if we have any local research on the issue of giving homework to our students? I ask this,
Yes.
Mr. President, distinguished colleague, because I also believe that learning is cultural.
Yes.
And while we have a lot of research abroad that can help us give insights on whether to continue or giving or not giving homework to our students, or yung magnitude of homework that we will be giving them. Perhaps it's a good idea if we can have some sort of local study or research that was used by perhaps the Department of Education as basis for its position on this particular issue.
Thank you. I appreciate that, that question, because again, it was something I failed to point out. Two things. As early as 2010, and you can Google it, it's online, I made a statement reacting to DepEd Memorandum number 392, because in that memorandum, the memorandum, I believe, was a reminder. That's what I'm looking for, the actual memorandum. The one that is. No, but what is it? Ito na po. So, under the DepEd Memorandum 392, it was an advisory to public school teachers against giving public homework during weekends. So meron na po yun, 2010, no? And at that time, baka po yung ibang kasama ko dito, nag-react na rin kayo. Nag-react na rin ako noon. Kaya, although, I have to say, mas inaral ko to ngayon because it really, after that, I became the chairman of the Committee on Education and I did my own studies. But as early as that time, my simple reaction was that perhaps we can interpret that memorandum by way of reminding the teachers to come up with more creative type of homeworks, to hone their skills in other areas like music and arts, so that they can continue, and this is a direct quote of what I said, so they can continue to learn and enjoy their weekends and bond with their parents at the same time. Again,
That's a good.
children who come from a privileged background do these things. Although, hampered din, kasi kahit naman yung private school, yung iba mabigat magbigay ng homework, but they do have that ability to bond with their parents kasi panonoorin yung basketball game nila, panonoorin yung quiz bee nila, etc., etc. This was 2010. This is the more interesting history. There is an international assessment called the PISA, Program for International Student Assessment. And when I presented the ranking, this PISA is one of those well-known and, I guess, respected rankings of schools. And you will be surprised to find out that the Philippines has not participated since 2003. So it's very sad. But I have good news. We finally participated. So in December of 2019, in 2 months, we will have results. And I would like to suggest that we await these results, no? To see what we can gather and how we can use our very own data to assess what needs to be done moving forward.
Well, we look forward to it, and again, we thank the distinguished lady from Taguig for this very insightful discussion. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you, dear colleagues.
Senator Ontiveros and then Senator Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm glad to take the floor after the good gentleman from Bulacan, because one of my 3 points was really to solicit the views of our 2 chairmen of the Senate Committees on Education. And I hope if Senator Sherwin will return to the floor. It's all right, sir. If the other chairman is returning to the floor, I would appreciate.
So can I take my seat for a few
Yes.
minutes?
No,
You'll
please.
call on them?
No, good lady from Taguig. I was really going to ask them for their insights on how this element of homework fits in with what the good gentleman from Bulacan mentioned, finally our upgrading to a K-12 system, and how that fits in with the whole package of education reforms that their 2 committees are preparing the policy framework for. So that's one, Mr. President. My other point was the good lady from Taguig asks the question, how much or how little homework? And it's really good that 2 of the best practices models she presented are Japan and South Korea. Because I recall
Japan, South
Mr.
Korea, and Finland.
And Finland,
So,
although
just to clarify with your
Yes,
permission, very
yes.
different yung approaches
Yes.
po nila. But please proceed.
Pero napaka-interesante nung dalawang bansang yon from East Asia, because I remember, Mr. President, a few years ago, there were concerns being raised by educators and parents from within those countries about how much homework was tied up with the pressure, Senator Grace mentioned that earlier, the pressure being brought to bear on the students in an even more and more competitive learning environment. Na minsan hindi na daw yung mga estudyante lamang ang competitive, yung mga parents pa. Also because they have their eye not only on learning competencies in school, pero kung paano daw ito magmamatch sa success ng mga anak nila later on in the world of work. And so related to the matter of pressure, I wanted to ask the good lady from Taguig her insights about how addressing the question of how much or how little homework properly also relates to the good mental and emotional
Yes.
health of our students in the schools, Mr. President.
Thank you for that question. I actually appreciate that you asked because it was a conscious decision on my part not to include that angle because then my speech would have been overly encompassing too many issues on education. But I really appreciate it because I do want to share my insight on it. The objective of the data that we gathered in that graph that I showed, just showing the top 5 schools, top 5 countries with the least homework versus their rankings, no, shows that that's the general output in that country. But it does not reflect on the negative effects, including all the pressure that Her Honor mentioned, because there are. We know about it. There are even suicide rates in these countries, no, that have I believe those countries have been trying to address it, and that is why I put in my own bias and said Finland is my favorite because they have the more laid-back approach to academics, and yet they're still in the top. So that to me is the win-win scenario. And I'd like to believe that I was able to have the best of that world also, given the kind of education I had. I went to San Beda, Alabang at the time when they were following this individual instruction approach, which basically simply means that if you want to go faster, go faster. If you need to go slower, go slower. So less pressure.
I guess, Mr. President, one learning we can pick up from this discussion so far is that there are really many elements that come together to achieving what the good lady, for example, has described as a holistic child or holistic education. So it's good to be able to focus on each one of them at some point in time. For my third and last point, Mr. President, well, the good Senate President himself asked the question, where do our children and where should our children best do their homework? And that reminded me of I think a very healthy approach taken, for example, by Montessori education. There's also the Waldorf, other progressive and alternative methods. There are consultations going on now right here in the Senate tungkol sa tinatawag nilang inclusive education. And I think one thing that they're trying to teach us there is that really if we can maximize the teaching methodology, the pedagogy inside the classrooms, inside the formal learning spaces, so that our children achieve their academic competencies and non-academic competencies within the classroom, then that frees up more of their time and their emotional energy for play, for rest, for doing nothing, for spending more time with their families kapag wala sila sa eskwelahan. And then taken all together with the reforms that have been started already with this shift to K-12 in terms of the schools, the textbooks, the teacher training, etc., the budget, as the colleagues were talking about earlier. That if we can reform and modernize our education system piece by piece, then I suppose it will enable our children to learn as much as they need to at the time they need to and in the places where they need to. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the good lady.
I really commend the good senator for pointing out inclusive education. I happen to be an author of that. It is really true that every child has different needs, but I need to emphasize that until we can improve our teacher-to-student ratio, I do not believe that any program can achieve what we want to achieve, because a teacher is only human. A teacher is not a robot. And some of our teachers, most of our teachers in Metro Manila, still have to have 2 classes in a day. So a first batch in the morning, a second batch in the afternoon. And these are, I think, average of 40 students. These countries that have achieved a lot in terms of with the inclusive or the progressive approach, my daughters went to Montessori, so I'm very familiar. Their classroom sizes are so much smaller. And I envy that situation, and that is my dream for the Filipino youth, to be able to have this kind of environment. One way that we can address that is to have also more parents, more volunteers in the classrooms, and I actually am drafting a bill on that, because imagine this scenario, many women, many mothers would be familiar. For men, maybe if you're a hands-on father, but otherwise, I don't know how typical this scenario is for you. If you have 3 children, and tatlo yan sabay-sabay na medyo nagkaroon ng konting temper tantrum, tatlo pa lang yon, mahihirapan ka na to move forward. Can you imagine a classroom with 40 students? What if 5% of the 40, so that's just 2, right? 2 have a learning disability. What if another 5% don't have a learning disability but are slow learners? What if another 2 are very normal but are hyperactive, pagod nang nakaupo? Yung pa lang, Mr. President, that one teacher in 40 will have a hard time managing that classroom. So those are to me very basic issues that I think we can address with teacher assistants, with volunteers, and I hope to get her honor's support in due time when I file the bill.
You'll have it, good lady. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Gordon?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Will the gentle lady yield to a few questions?
Of course, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to be clarified. Does the gentle lady propose no homework, some homework, or more homework?
Thank you for that question. Actually, Mr. President, what I really did is to pose the question to the body. To pose the question and to present the other issues that we need to take a look at before we can make a what do you call it, a informed decision on more, less, or none. But I mean, I'll be honest, my inclination is the younger you are, the less homework. That is my inclination. But my point is, we need to study this very carefully before we make this kind of judgment. This is a law. This is not even. This will be a law, not just a DepEd order.
Thank you. I see the intention, very good, but on the other hand, I was talking with Senator Pimentel. We were kind of worried about legislating homework.
I myself, Mr. President, that is my inclination as well.
It will have to be a choice between the teachers and the parents actively participating in decisions made in school. I think that would be just a suggestion. I don't know whether that's going to work.
I am inclined to support that, Mr. President. I mean no disrespect to all the legislators who filed, but from my studies, teaching is a very specific calling, and to be an effective teacher, you need to have that kind of latitude to decide. Now, I do believe that DepEd can step up and come up with better guidelines, no? But as to legislation, I would really worry, Mr. President, if we even have the time, because we could call all the experts, but do we even have the time to focus on something as specific as this, to legislate number of hours?
I read an article which I made sure I made an outline of maybe even 4 or 5 years ago. But then before I go into that, let me just put it this way. Let us sink our teeth into brute reality. Let's say in Metro Manila, Luzon, and Southern Luzon, where everybody tries to go to work backwards or forwards.
All at the same time.
So much so that because of the traffic, parents rarely see their children. They will leave early at home, and they will come back late at night. Hindi na makita. Ngayon kung may homework yan, lalong mahihirapan yung bata dahil wala silang guide. Di ba? Hindi naman katulad na natin masaswerte o na nagsikap sa ating mga pamilya, yung mga magulang natin, na tayo nagsikap para magkaroon tayo ng konting kaunlaran. Eh, hindi naman lahat ganun. Yung iba kumakayod pa eh. So it's important na that is considered in the process. Now, maybe I'm not trying to say I have a better mousetrap, no? To my mind, what is important is a child looking forward to go to school. Because the teacher not only looks good, not only smells good, not only thinks good, but really care. Will you please stop gesticulating then? Mr. Chairman, I'm being disturbed by the pastor of the call. He was gesticulating. And not only look good, think good, but certainly, Mr. President, Mr. President, to try and make sure that the teacher makes it extremely interesting for the child so that the child pines and hungers to go to school.
Agree?
Now, Mr. President, we have, I was in Olongapo over the weekend, and I came across the division schools, and I went there. And I was glad and sorry because I saw a group of new teachers that came from the private school.
Okay.
Because
And now?
the salaries are higher now.
Yes.
But still, even if they're higher, it's still low, right? We prioritize the military, the police, and that's good. But we need to prioritize also the nurses and the teachers. And that, to me, I would have made that priority, but then I'm not the president, and we're not the president. So the teachers ought to get the brunt of education. And I'm not talking about schools. I'm talking about quality teachers.
Yes, me too.
The suggestion is that it's the teacher stupid. Meaning to say, if we put in more money to the teacher, na talaga he will do her work, sila mag-homework, sila magpa-practice, so that they can do all the, make the subject interesting, give them all the teacher's aids and tools, even have, even 2 teachers to a class. One is a para-teacher that supports a teacher. Even if you have a big class and you have 2 of those, I think maybe it might be even better for the child. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree, Mr. President. If you noticed during the course of my privileged speech and explanation, I think I mentioned 2 or 3 times about attracting the best to enter the teaching profession.
That's
Because-
why I like you have good judgment and good taste.
Thank you, Mr. President.
And that just trying to make it more relevant. And to my mind, the other principle that I'm thinking of is sometimes we want to have nice schoolrooms, etc., but they really are white and sepulchres, but inside there is nothing. Meaning to say, there is no teaching aids. Dito, kita mo, we have PowerPoint presentations that can be done. They have, all the equipment that they need, computers, etc. That's why in my previous life as commission, as election service, I wanted automated election, pero laptops, Mr. President, which we do in the Red Cross, so that after every election, you can leave the laptops in school where we vote. And that's something that I still would like to pursue with my friend, whoever is now the chairman of, chairman of the Commission election. So we kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But really, upon the other hand, the focus should be looking at especially the folks at the countryside. You will want the lower 50 not able to perform as well as the Ateneo, the Xavier, the La Salle, Ateneo, UP, UST, and all that. I'm not being Bruno's, but you will want to make sure that our people sa probinsya magkaroon sila ng dagdag na tulong, especially for the lower half na dapat bigyan ng magagaling na teacher. Mag-invest tayo doon ng magagaling na teacher because talaga doon ang tinuturo sa kanila palagi araw-araw na magulang, mahirap lang tayo kaya mag-aral ka.
Yes,
Kung mag-aaral ka
yes.
at magaling yung teacher mo, talagang meron tayong pag-asa. And our country is at the golden age of our age, the youth. We are really the sweet spot of age in any part of Asia. China is getting older. Japan is really old. But the Philippines has got a huge population and still growing. Even if we're doing family planning already, lumalaki pa rin ang population natin. So we have to concentrate on creating what Lee Kuan Yew calls a quality population. A quality population where you get them at the beginning of their early years and teach them. So sa akin, I'm sure, I'm sure, like I said, the gentle lady has great taste and good judgment. I'm sure she will see to it that is done. Also, the other point is preschool programs. There's a study by Harvard economist James Heckman. He says that preschool programs for disadvantaged kids, I'm talking about disadvantaged kids, cost $10,000 for students a year, but generate a 16% annual rate of return. So, mas natututo, mas malaki ang return. And then, of course, I will just go very fast because I know I'm also very tired. I had a hearing this morning and didn't sleep very well last night. Let us forget class size, curriculums, budgets. The most effective policy is good teachers. That's what the study is saying, according to Eric Hanushek, education specialist, Stanford University's Hoover Institution. And here's another tidbit for us. Focus on teachers, and he said, according to Hanushek, students taught by the worst 10% of teachers achieve only 50% of average gains, while those in the best teachers' classes improve by 150%. So what's the point? You go to school and your teacher is mahina, ang performance mo, 50%. Pero kung magaling ang teacher mo, kahit na mahirap ka, aabot ka ng 150%. Do we agree on this matter? I think that's something that fatherhood, no?
I agree 101%, Mr. President.
Because sometimes we content to come out and say build monuments of nice schools, but in reality, you know, if you remember in our philosophy classes in Greece, there were no schoolrooms, that they were part of the peripatetic school where Socrates and Aristotle would talk while they are walking. And they would go under the tree and they would talk.
Yes.
And universities in the old age, in Bologna and all these other universities, halos hindi pumapasok yung mga tao. They're just responsible for learning at home, and when they have the schools or orals, they can still answer. And still, they got the Renaissance and the Golden Age. So, Mr. President, you know, the other thing is, Kumisan, we're so certification conscious, which is tama, no? But upon the other hand, there are many teachers also who can teach even with less certification.
For sure, Mr.
So
President.
I think it's important that we in the Senate try to come out with a study talaga and decide we want to be the knowledge center of Asia. That would be the vision. And if we want to be the knowledge center of Asia, in the following years, this is what we're going to invest in terms of teachers, build a little more schools, but have teachers with the equipment and with the caliber that will upgrade and uplift the education of our children. I was telling Senator Pimentel a while ago, if you ask an Indian 87 times 69, he will know the answer. Pero umabot lang tayo by road, sila by road hanggang doon. Ang mga bata dito, kumisan hanggang 14 lang ata or hanggang 12. That's why pag nag-square root na o nag-cube root, alam pa rin nila ang sagot. No? But to my mind, again, it all boils down, and I really believe this in my heart, to good teachers. So I would support any initiative on the part of the two gentlemen, si Sherwin Gatchalian and of course si yung kanyang kapatid na si Joel Villanueva, magkamukha naman sila, and they're getting education. So let us hope that they are going to accept these suggestions from us. Because although we do not have the franchise on intelligence, there's nothing like discussing, and there's nothing like having a vision and a proper plan to see to it that, let's say, in 10 years, we can even achieve to be part of the higher group in Asia. Because right now, you can see all the scores. You were citing scores. Eh, pati nga basketball, kulelat na naman tayo ngayon, nasa 37 na naman tayo ata, di ba? Or, doesn't really matter, but the point is, pag tinignan mo ang ating grades, even in the economy, we're always down. And you cannot be down overnight. You have to really start by going down to the grassroots and making sure that we get the best teachers possible. So, going back to my experience in Olongapo, yung nakita ko mga teachers na lumipat, glad ako na lumilipat sila sa public schools, nagwo-worry naman ako sa private schools. Now, the private schools are now having a problem because they cannot hire teachers because mataas, they cannot compete. And therefore, would you be open, would the gentle lady be open to the idea that we should subsidize para equalize yung mga teachers sa private schools, especially those that make the grade all the time?
Actually, Mr. President, the concept that we have in place right now, which is being done in Taguig City also, is the GASPE, where the city can give vouchers to the students.
That's being done all
who
over the
cannot-
country.
Yes, so that cannot be accommodated anymore, because it's actually cheaper for the city than to build more classrooms.
Correct.
And to, so in that sense, that is the subsidy that
See,
is available. So they're now supporting the survival of the private schools.
But that is present on the part of Taguig. No? Why? Because bakit ako mag-i-invest ng capital kung meron namang gagamitin and we will invest on the teachers and you have the same results. So I guess there is really no number one mousetrap or one size fits all, but your idea of homework will depend on the locality, on the PTA, because you want the teacher and the parents and the teacher and the student helping one another to make a better student. But upon the other hand, you want to make sure that the child has ambition. And the only way he can have ambition is if he finds
Models.
satisfaction in the teachers,
Agreed.
because he is hungry every day to learn more. And he will only get that if you have a great teacher.
And I totally agree with that, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank the gentlelady for being patient with this gentleman. Thank you very much.
I learned a lot
Thank you.
from the gentleman from Zambales. Thank you.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, with that, I move to refer the speech of the lady senator and all the comments and interpellations done to the Committee on Basic Education. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, so referred.
Also, a change of referral, Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to change the referral of Senate Bill number 544, or the Metro Bataan Development Authority, from the Committee on Government Corporations to the Committee on Local Government as the primary committee, and the Committee on Government Corporations will now become secondary committee, and Committee on Finances tertiary committee, provided under Rule 16, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Ano gusto mo, break muna? Break muna?
Meron ka ba i-take up o John?
Mr. President, may I move for a 1-minute Senate suspension? One Senate
Session
minute.
is suspended for a few Senate minutes. Si, ano?
actually, nakagalang-galang.
Ito, Lord, anong posta mamaya? Ano na? Philippines? Plus 37.5. Ang tayo niya, ano eh, pwede bang kulin yun? Hindi kaya, no? Serbia?
Abot pa sa sintahan naman.
Ano, tumaya siya? Oh, nung Sabado, tumaya eh. Eh ngayon, tumaya ulit. Ano kaya? Ikaw, ano ka? Tataya ka ba? Hindi. Pampakilite. Oo nga eh. 37.5, kaya natin yun. Baka naman ano, no? Baka masyadong malaki, ha? Baka masyadong malaki yung 37.5. Baka yun eh. Baka galingin yung mga outside shooting natin dito. Di ba? Siyempre, baka mga 20 lang. Mga 30 lang ang naman. Hindi, kaso lima daw ang NBA ng Serbia eh. Gano'n tinayang libig? Ano nga? Magkano nga? Ano? 5,000? Nagsampu kayo?
May dala ka, kamako.
Iniisip ko rin eh. Saan? Saan? Kailan yun?
Pero tune up na yun for the...
China, sino kalaban? Ah, sino binibigyan ng plus 2.5? Ang China? Ah, tapos na.
Taekwondo player ba? Hindi ka maglaro.
Mamaya,
Sige sir, pero...
China ulit.
Ay, hindi taekwondo
Ay,
player.
lagyan mo na ako ng ano.
Messenger lang namin sa karami. Liaison officer. Sir, wala kong practice.
Hindi mo sa China, pinambusan.
Wala practice ha?
Ano?
Kalaban niya.
2.5 plus sa
70
China.
time ba yun na ano sa doon sa...
Tapos tayo,
Oo, sa Cebu.
O, sige,
Oo, si Pares, mga ganun.
Si Pares. Hindi, laban na.
sige. O, sige, sige. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Tanga yung arrest, di ba? Di numero
Hindi,
yan.
so,
Numero. Tapos ito, kayo wala bang alam, walang numero. Basta boom na lang ng boom.
Boom lang, boom.
Naminti ko sa ulo, pilde. Hilak ang taga Cebu. Hilak
Building
ng
Cebu.
pilde.
Building Cebu.
mga 30 lang ang lamang.
15. 15 o kaya 20.
Kahit 30.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session resumed.
Yes, before we
Shortly
adjourn,
later.
Mr. President, thank you, Mr. President. We have just additional reference to business, but before we move for that, just a change of referral. I move to transfer to the committee referral of SBN number 894, or Reforms in Real Property Valuation, from the Committee on Finance to the Committee on Ways and Means as the primary committee, and Committee on Local Government, the secondary committee, and Committee on Finance as the tertiary committee. Similar bills, Senate Bill number 246 and 519, were also referred to these committees, Mr. President. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion approved.
I move for the additional reference of business, Mr. President.
The Secretary will proceed with the reference of business.
Second additional reference of business, bills on first reading, Senate number 994, entitled An Act Providing for a National Framework for Interns' Rights and Welfare, introduced by Senator Ontiveros.
Referred to the Committees on Higher Education and Finance.
Senate number 995, an act amending Articles 29, 97, 99, 171, and 174, creating a new Article 99-A under Act number 3815 as amended, otherwise known as the Revised Penal Code, introduced by Senator Angara.
To the Committees on Justice and Constitutional Amendments.
Senate number 996, an act providing for the manner of selecting an acting president as required under Article 7, Section 7 of the Constitution, introduced by Senator Pimentel III.
To the Committee on Constitutional Amendments.
Senate number 997, an act creating the Department of Overseas Employment, defining its powers and functions, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Pacquiao.
To the Committees on Labor, Foreign Relations, and Finance.
Senate number 998, an act amending Articles 97 and 99 of Act number 3815 as amended, otherwise known as the Revised Penal Code, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Justice and Constitutional Amendments.
Resolution. PS Resolution number 121, entitled Resolution Directing the Senate Committee on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the proliferation of online lending companies in possible violation of Republic Act number 9474 or the Lending Company Regulation Act of 2007, introduced by Senator Poe.
To the Committee on Banks.
Committee reports. Committee report number 2, submitted by the Committee on Rules on PS Resolution number 66, introduced by Senator Zubiri, entitled Resolution Reconstituting the Special Committee on Marawi City Rehabilitation, recommending its adoption, sponsor Senator Zubiri.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 3, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Rules on PS Resolution number 122, with Senator Zubiri and the members of the Committee on Rules as authors thereof, entitled Resolution Amending Sections 13, so paragraph 10, 13, 14, 20, 25, and 39, Rule 10 of the Rules of the Senate, and creating the Committee on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovation, and Futures Thinking, and report on the 27th August 2019 Committee on Rules meeting on the rationalization merging of some committees, taking into consideration PS Resolution number 44, recommending its approval, sponsor Senator Zubiri.
To the calendar for ordinary business. So the leader.
Was that the rules amendments? Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I move that we adjourn session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Tuesday, September 3, 2019. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Chair hears none. Session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Tuesday, September 3, 2019.